Hey everybody, welcome back. These are all submissions to the question, women that were the affair partner, what's your story? Here's some things they're going by. The questions are, did you know that the other person was involved in a relationship? Did you care? How did you get into the relationship? How did it affect your mental and emotional health? And what was the outcome? So let's just get right into it. All right, here's a doozy. I was involved with a married man when I was 18. He was in his 40s and was my professor in one of my classes. I knew he was married, but he told me they were separating and didn't love each other anymore and all that. I was young and stupid and didn't think too hard about it. We met in class and he invited me to have coffee and discuss career paths in his field because he said I was uncommonly talented. Oh my gosh, man. I started going to his office hours every week, staying to talk after classes, etc. I honestly don't remember how exactly we started hooking up or how it became a full-on relationship. At first, it was so hot and made me feel so wanted and and grown up. But the longer it went on without him leaving his wife, the worse it made me feel. How do you think a wife feels? Oh, sorry, I gotta keep going. His wife found out and reported us to the university. I lost my scholarship based on a morality clause, and he faced no consequences. They stayed together and I switched majors and avoided him for the rest of my time in college. But I felt truly awful whenever I saw his wife and eventually their baby around town. Karma certainly came for me, but I like to think I learned from the experience. So wait. Oh, she lost the scholarship, but she didn't leave the college. All right, that was the end of that post. And I can't believe that the guy didn't face any consequences when he's the one in the relationship. This student, first off, is a student in his class, which means he has more power in the situation and probably more influence. He has more influence in this type of situation, and he's the one that's married. Why would she lose her scholarship over a morality clause when she's not even married? Sure, she did something bad because she probably knows that the guy is married, and yet she was a part of this, affair, but he's the one that is actually married to the wife, and he didn't face anything having to do with consequences surrounding morality. Wow, I'm just gonna keep going. In one of the videos before this one, I was talking about how the woman had an affair and then her husband is putting restrictions on what she's doing. It's one of the pancake ones. I'll link it down below if you want to hear it. Anyways, she was saying that before she had the affair, she didn't really remember how they got there and she didn't really recognize the steps that she was taking into moving forward in this affair. And isn't it crazy that in this post, the lady was saying, oh, I don't even remember how we got to that point. I just want to know if there's anyone listening who feels that way too. And then I want to know, how do you feel like you don't remember when you started feeling for someone, or when your relationship started to develop in a way that was flirtatious and past being whatever the relationship was before? If you were friends before and then you start feeling something for someone, you definitely know that you were feeling it for someone. And I know that there are sometimes friends who are maybe they both have a crush on each other and then they're both also the type of people who aren't acting on the crush, but they both probably know that somewhere in their heart they do like each other, they just didn't act on it. But how can you say you don't even remember when that point started to change? Because if you actually like the person and then you start heading in the direction of anything past being friends or the relationship that you are in right now, wouldn't you remember that happening? Because you would feel like, oh my gosh, this guy actually does like me, or oh my gosh, we're moving forward in this direction. Wouldn't you feel like, oh, we're going to the next step? You would feel it. Don't say that you don't remember. And if you do, can you explain how? Because I just don't see that happening. Is that a hot take from me? Hot take. Anyways, he was my what if guy. We had briefly dated before he moved away for work and had a really intense connection. We kept in touch sporadically over the years, but once I started dating my partner, I cut things off because I felt it wasn't fair. He popped up again a few years later and was messaging me frequently and flirtatiously. This time it started to feel like it was an emotional affair. I found out he had a girlfriend this time and cut it off again. Okay, you got some control. Another few years passed and he gets in touch. Me and my partner had broken up and I was feeling extremely vulnerable and sad. And it felt like maybe this was finally our chance to explore things. He told me he was also newly single, so it felt even more fated. He came on extremely strong and had a lots of promises and grand claims of big gestures to come. He came home for a visit and we slept together, and he ghosted me. I was still emotionally mashed up from the breakup, so I let it go. Also, this is in parentheses, not the first time he pulled this move on me. Intimacy on a visit home to completely disappear without a word, a stark contrast to the daydreaming I would do for weeks leading up to his visits. I had a nagging feeling, we're out of the parentheses now, welcome out. I had a nagging feeling a few months later and did some social media digging. Turned out he was not newly single, he was newly married. He was married. It was tough to accept because I realized the entire time I was clinging to this idea that we had some extremely deep connection. When really, he was just using me for yay and had no respect or genuine care for me. I deluded myself into thinking we had some soulmate bond. Worse yet, I realized even though I always cut things off between us when we were both partnered, I always had some hope in the back of my mind that it would work out between us. It taught me a lot about how much more healing I had to do, especially around emotionally unavailable men and codependency. I also felt extremely used and foolish and discarded. A really painful saga that went on for over 5 years and left my self-esteem in tatters, as I couldn't stop wondering if he ever cared about me. No. And why she would be good enough to commit to, but I never was. It felt further complicated by the fact that we didn't live in the same city. And he would say things about how if he didn't have to move, things would have been so different. Long distance would have been so hard on us both. Blah, blah, blah. Yet he would randomly message me after months of silence, asking me if I was married yet, with no intention of anything other than messing with my head. This one? Are you kidding me? It seems like she was actually trying to do the right thing the entire time that she was interacting with this guy who was apparently like kind of her friend. And even when she was in a relationship, she would say, oh no, I can't do this, even though she really wanted to be with this guy, or at least explore the feeling of maybe being with this guy. But if she was committed to someone else, she wouldn't do it. And then they actually crossed that boundary, and he was newly married, so not even newly in a relationship, which would be like, okay, a few weeks to a month or whatever of being with the person that he's going out with now. He was newly married, which means there was time before. How long were they like engaged or in a relationship before they even got married? Let's move on to the next one. Not a full-blown affair, but when I was 21, I banged a friend of a friend who sometimes hung out with our friend group. When our mutual friend found out, she pulled me aside and told me he was married. I had no idea. He was very flirty and never referenced his wife. And I never thought to ask because I wasn't trying to date him. And I was a bit naive. He was Canadian. Oh, Canada. And apparently his wife was still back home while he worked in our city. This all happened in the US. I found the wife on MySpace and sent her pictures of his texts and told her what happened. Then I blocked her. I never saw the guy again at all. And AFAIK, the mutual friend, cut ties with him. AFAIK means as far as I know, if you want to know. Yikes. At least you kind of dodged being involved for too long or having it be like a work thing. If you're ever going to be with someone, I just wonder if you would ask them whether or not they're in a relationship first so you don't overstep. But at the same time, it's also up to them to divulge whether or not they're in a relationship and kind of set boundaries with strangers. So it's not really your job to make sure they're not in a relationship. So I guess if she was doing something casual, it kind of makes sense for her to not really ask or press further if she was just ready to wham bam and get out of there. Here's another one. I hooked up with a coworker that had been flirting with me for a while. Never gave any indication that he was anything but single and quite frankly, a dog. As far as I knew, we were both unattached and looking for some occasional casual fun, which is exactly what we did. Imagine my surprise when I found out he not only had a girlfriend, but a pregnant girlfriend. I cut that shit off immediately, and I would have told her, but this was before the rise of social media, and I had no idea how to reach her. He also very quickly changed jobs once it came out. She sought me out later to ask questions, and I answered them honestly and apologetically. We stayed social media friends after that, which he clearly didn't know about. Years later, a few weeks before they were set to be married, he sent me a bunch of dirty messages inviting me out on Snapchat. I immediately screenshotted and sent to her. She married him anyway, and they have 3 kids now. I think about her a lot. Even though she told her everything that happened, she still married the guy. It wasn't technically an affair, as he wasn't married, but I was young and stupid in my early 20s and ended up dating someone 20 years older who had been seeing someone. I didn't know about the other woman when I first started seeing him. I legitimately fell in love, and he gradually stopped seeing the other woman. Then, a couple years later, he ended up cheating and dumping me for someone else. I had to learn the hard way that cheaters always cheat. Do you guys think cheaters always cheat? Let me know down in the comments below. If I ever learn that someone has cheated, for some reason I feel like they could cheat again, but then you're kind of saying that people never change, and then people can change for the better sometimes too. But I have to admit, it does make you want to tread lightly, you know? You also have to be careful because someone could have cheated and then they just never tell you that they cheated. And it's the same like when you ask someone, are you in a relationship or do you have a girlfriend or whatever, or a boyfriend? Then, you know, they could always say no. If they're cheating, they could lie too. It's not just that they would do one and not the other. They could just say no and then keep going and you wouldn't know anyways, even if you did try to ask and be nice. And why does it seem like in a lot of these, the guy is like much, much, much older than the woman? Nothing wrong with someone dating an older guy, but when the older guy is the one that's like in the married relationship and then also the one that's like trying to get a younger woman to like be with them and lying and just being an overall creep and coward, it just seems like, are you kidding me? Like this one, here's another one. I was the 19-year-old babysitter and he was in his late 30s. I was absolutely paralyzed when he came on to me, and he was a prominent member of our community. Ooh, watch out, Warren, baby. His wife was literally my hero. I was so ashamed. I cared so deeply and felt so much guilt. I just didn't know how to deal at the time, and I didn't have support. It took years for me to process that this was not my fault. I wasn't the only one, and she very likely knew. Ooh, that's interesting. Even if you were the person that was the affair partner or the one that was the other woman, maybe the wife knows that the husband is like that, and then that's just a part of their relationship that she's come to terms with or might be struggling with but still doesn't leave. Oh, but I feel so bad that she was paralyzed by this happening. And even 19, when someone is 19 and this happens, a lot of 19-year-olds may not be in a place where they know how to stand up for themselves or draw a line, especially to someone who is like in this post a prominent member of their community or a part of a family that she looks up to. So wow, what do you do in that situation? I can tell you, you stand your ground. You say, no, I'm not going to do this, and just leave. Just get out of there if you don't like what's going on. And if you happen to freeze and you can't say no and leave and get out of there, knock something over. I know it sounds crazy, it sounds weird, but knock something over, something big, preferably glass, and then maybe it'll stop things. And it's sad, plan something like this and think about something like this. Just break something, because if you can't move and this person is going to keep doing whatever they were doing before, break something so that at least you can call attention from someone else that might be nearby, and it would also stop that kind of mood by causing something else to happen. I'm so sorry if it happened to you, and if it does continue to happen and you just can't move and you can't even break anything and you can't stand your ground, it is not your fault, because they should know not to do that. They should know better than that. On we go. I was 20 and it wasn't a full-blown affair so much as, to me in those years, a summer fling. I met an old acquaintance while staying in a country we had both previously lived in. Literally ran into each other at an expat bar in a popular area of the particular city. And it felt like fate. He was about 10 years older and I pursued him. He fell into a pattern with me with little resistance. He said he had called his engagement off before even traveling to the city. I think I did believe him, but the truth was that I really didn't care because I was 20 and thought I was invincible. I never thought about his maybe fiance, definitely girlfriend back home. I just thought about having fun and making memories in that moment with a man I had a big crush on back as a teenager. It didn't really have much of an impact on my mental or emotional health, and there was no outcome other than we parted ways after we returned to our respective homelands. I had known and intended from the outset for our time together to be temporary. We promised to write, but barely did, and although he did hit me up like once per year for several years afterward, including after he actually got married, although the last few times were just a friendly hi, according to him, as men always do. She said that. I didn't say that. It's in the post. I mostly just didn't respond, or only responded half-heartedly after several days of boredom. By the time I finished uni. I know I've been doing a lot of accents in this video, but the reason is because when I'm reading this, sometimes I just read the accent. All correspondence had petered off. I definitely feel some regret looking back now as a fully fledged adult. Of course, I thought he was handsome and tortured and fabulous back at 20. Why was he tortured? But now I see he was quite a weak man, just like was very spoiled and selfish girl. I should have carried on knowing he had a girlfriend and probable fiance, but in those days, I had different morals from what I do now. So I feel regret, but there's no guilt or shame weighing down on me either. That's the most honest summary I can give. You know what? This matches more to the feeling that someone probably gets whenever they say, I don't really remember how it happened. Maybe they just didn't care. And I'm not saying that in a bad way. It's just, it could be the truth, but I really want to know. I really want to know how you don't remember how it happened. If you're saying you just don't know how you remember this relationship progressing, because imagine meeting someone and then you introduce them to your family and friends and you're like, oh, this is my new boo. And then they say, how'd you guys meet? How'd this happen? And you're like, I don't remember how this even happened. Okay, sure. Oh my gosh, this comment is saying what I feel. It's so crazy how many of these stories start with, I was insert super young age. It makes me think of my own experience. I had just turned 23 like that week and I actively pursued him, or so I thought. But this thread has me rethinking. He wasn't in a relationship at the time, but he continued a friends with benefits situation with me long after we both had new dating partners. Oh, and he was 46. I remember some folks at the time telling me that I was being manipulated, but I couldn't see it. Watch out, baby boy, baby. I had a crush and the heck was good. And he was charming. Also British and worldly. Does British mean worldly? I was freshly off of a divorce. Hey, if you're British, no hard feelings. Just wondering why they're put together. I was freshly off of a divorce. Yes, at 23. I got married at 19. Gotta put that meme in here where they're like, damn. And had only had one partner and was actively deconstruct. Oh my gosh. I'm so happy they put this. I'm all over the place with this one, guys, but I'm having fun reading these. That's why I wanted to make this video. Whenever she said I got married at 19 and that was my only partner, I was just thinking, oh, maybe it was that thing where they're saving themselves for marriage because they're religious. I was freshly off of a divorce. Yes, at 23, I got married at 19 and had only one partner and was actively deconstructing the evangelical faith I grew up in. Hence the young marriage and divorce. Wow. I'm predicting everything before I'm reading it. He was kind of safe, meaning I knew there was no relationship possibility. I was hooked and intoxicated. I can't get past the cognitive dissonance of it all because he told me he was shocked and that I pursued him. But at 44, I think that's complete BS. Yeah, you act like you have no decision in the matter. What are you talking about? You're the one that came on to me. It's like over 20 years younger. Please. Anyways, I eventually ended it when his girlfriend moved in with him and it lasted about 15 months or so. Yeah, it's gross. And man, some people are really immature, it seems like. And if you're a man and you're listening to this, nothing against you as long as you're not one of these guys right here. This is a hard one for me. All right, watch out again, won't it, baby? This is a hard one for me. I was 24. My mom had just died. I'm so sorry. And I was living in a foreign country halfway across the world. He was my boss. No. I had met his wife and she was so kind to me. It started with a work trip we had together in another city for which he only booked one hotel room. Nothing happened and I figured money was just tight. The second work trip, I had been drinking and the room was much smaller and things happened. I felt so horrible the next day, but continued to kind of just roll with the advances and flirting the next day. We got back from the trip and I was so done. I told him so about a month later and it couldn't happen again. You know what this behind booty butthole said? That he thought it was good for his marriage because he was more excited sexually and it was leading to better life for him with his wife. Not even kidding. As if his wife would have been happy with that. They are divorced now many years later, not because of me, but because he is an unempathetic booty butthole. Also, I look back now on his behavior and see it as very predatory. I was in an extremely vulnerable state emotionally and felt very alone, and he totally knew that, and he was my boss. The man I married later on knew about the situation and used to use it to shame me. He was emotionally abusive. I'm over being shamed by it and also over men exerting their influences to make me feel small and beholden to them. I'm so sorry that you got into a relationship where someone was shaming you for what happened, because in that situation, first off, that's harassment in the workplace. So if that's happening to you, go tell HR because it's illegal in some places. Please tell somebody. If something happens to you, depending on what country you're in, you can take legal action too. So watch out. Also, I can't believe believe that, if you were to marry someone and then tell them that you were in this situation, that this person wouldn't like try to tell you that it wasn't really your fault. And especially like you don't know what could have happened to you if you were to try to reject these type of advances, because sometimes whenever that happens in like a corporate environment and a boss or someone is trying to do that kind of harassment towards a person who is like lower than them on the food chain, the corporate food chain, then their work environment starts to become toxic because of the power that their boss holds over their position. So it's kind of a lot. And then for you to try to tell the person who's supposed to be supporting you and they make you feel like you're the one that did something bad in that situation, that's absolutely wrong. You should be with someone who is supportive of you, supportive of your past, and they don't have to support the decisions that you made in your past, but I'm saying like if you told them something wrong that you might have done, like in this situation, this girl was intoxicated and it wasn't her who planned on being in the hotel room, but things still did escalate and she was a part of something wrong that happened. But you still shouldn't be like, I can't believe you did that, just because you never really know what happened like in the moment. You never really know what could have happened if things didn't go there. So just be nice to your partner and protect them from their past and now. Be nice. Alrighty, I'm gonna read one more and then but I gotta find a good one. All right, here's the last one, and it's a long one. Yay! Hi, I've been that woman before. In my early 20s, I got involved with a guy, let's call him Jim, who worked in the same department as me on a large university campus. We had pretty exciting jobs and got to go on overnight trips and to conferences semi-regularly. So business and pleasure inevitably overlapped. He was technically a level higher than me in the hierarchy, but he wasn't my boss. That's a better word, hierarchy, rather than the corporate food chain, even though it's almost the same thing, but he wasn't my boss. We were both fairly new to the job, so nobody really knew anyone's personal lives or history. Anyways, I had no idea that he was in a relationship when it all started. On one of our work trips with a group of colleagues, we'd all been drinking, and him and I just really hit it off. We had a lot in common and enjoyed each other's company, and one thing led to another. We started seeing each other outside of work. Mostly, we went to a local pub, across the street from the campus and got to know each other. We went on a few romantic overnight trips and he told me he had a roommate who was a female, which made me a little uncomfortable, but we weren't serious, so I didn't think about it. I still lived with my dad and wasn't comfortable having a guy come home with me, and he lived with his roommate, in quotes, and wasn't comfortable bringing a girl home. So we spent a lot of time at the pub or in one of our cars or staying in hotels overnight when we'd be drinking or doing los drogas. Watch out, baby. One baby. The DRUGS just showed up. They did the fluffy white powder, it goes on to say. They did the happy tiny pill, it goes on to say. And in hindsight, we both probably had a drinking problem. One night, we were at the pub with a group of people from work and this pregnant woman walked in. She went straight over to Jim and sat beside him and was acting kind of flirty. I wasn't a jealous type at all, so I just ignored it. And at the end of the night, everyone was going home. And Jim pulled me aside and said the pregnant woman was actually his roommate and he was going to go home with her because he'd been drinking. This should have been such a red flag, but I was 22 and very stupid and falling very quickly in love with him. You probably weren't stupid. You were probably just going through that halo effect where you can't really see the things that are wrong and your brain was probably just trying to make up some sort of story to protect you, just like when your door slams shut and you say, oh, it's just the wind. I completely idealized our situation and thought we would live happily ever after and tell our grandkids how we met at work and fell in love. We fit so well together. He loved everything about me, or said he did. I was an artsy graphic designer with my head in the clouds, and he was very grounded and really into economics and politics. Yet we still viewed the world in a similar way, wanted the same things in life, and had an identical sense of humor. It was a perfect balance, and we were insanely attracted to each other. The physical component was unreal and so good. We were so happy when we were together, goofing around, looking for excitement off the beaten track, trying new foods and experiences. I was addicted to that man. They're probably addicted to something else and doing it together, which strengthens whatever she thinks she had with this guy. So watch out for that, because sometimes it's not even your real feelings for someone. It's about what they get together and end up doing. And in this case, it wasn't just getting together and having yes, it was also getting together and doing los drogas. So when I found out that his pregnant roommate was actually his girlfriend, I was in straight up denial. First, he told me she was his ex, while also admitting that the unborn child was his. Ooh, you probably saw that one coming. He gave me a big story about how they had broken up but still lived together because he couldn't throw his pregnant ex out on the street. It would be cruel. I tried to make myself accept that. Eventually, I went to his apartment and finally discovered that he lived in a bachelor suite and there was only one bed. Are things connecting now? Things were adding up. I asked where he slept. He told me on the couch, but I was starting to see through his lies. I think she was starting to have suspicions around the same time. I was wondering, does a pregnant woman not realize that this guy is like going out a lot and hanging out with this woman, especially on the night where they were there together? I bet it wasn't just her who was acting flirty, especially if she says she's not the jealous type. I bet she was still probably acting somewhat the same around him, even with her there. He must have been telling her he was away for work a lot more than he actually was, and she must have seen him with me at that pub and at work and finally figured it out. She started showing up to those places whenever we were there together, and she'd speak to him outside or out of earshot, but I could tell she was upset. She never confronted me for a really long time, so Jim was able to keep the BS going, thin and frail as it was, for a bit longer after that. It was a friend of hers that eventually spoke directly to me and informed me that she was in fact his current girlfriend. They had not broken up, and they had figured out that I was sleeping with Jim. The friend was incredibly nasty to me about it though. She actually said that if the baby was born with any kind of disabilities or health issues, she was going to blame me for it. I truly hated myself then, and I guess the self-hatred just made me need Jim even more because I could only feel a semblance of happiness when he was around. He convinced me that his relationship with her was over and that they would part ways as soon as the child was born. I was so stupid and believed him for far too long. I can recall moments that I was with him. Sometimes we just slept in my car so we could be together, and she would call him and scream profanities through the phone, knowing I could hear it. She would text him 100 times, calling me a whore, a fly, and a homewrecker. But she always just wanted him back. He was never blamed for any of it. It was a very messy situation for a month or two after that, and before it finally became so toxic that I ended things very dramatically and told him, never speak to me again. Work was incredibly awkward after that. Most people knew the situation by that point and had strong opinions about it one way or the other. He quit his job not long after that. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he moved to another city and that he cheated on his girlfriend repeatedly with other women, even after his child was born. Yeah, honestly, the way to avoid that is if you feel like something is a red flag and then you try to look past it, it's probably a red flag. Also, just try to avoid dating people from work. Even if it seems like things are overlapping a lot, if you go on business trips together and stuff, just completely try to avoid getting even closer. And if you feel like you're starting to have more and more feelings for this person, either direct your attention elsewhere or admit to yourself that you're feeling this and don't try to explore further unless that's what you really want. And if it is what you really want, you really need to be careful about how you're going to go about this and just try to have a serious talk beforehand, because the way to see whether or not someone is like a truthful person or something, and I know it's tough because some people just want to be casual, so they probably aren't going to be like, oh, what do you think this relationship's going to turn into? Like the what are we kind of talk, and people avoid that. If you really want to see what type of person someone is, just have that kind of talk, because it's going to scare away the people that you don't want to have in your life. Hate to say it, it probably will. Try it out. If you want to see what I mean. Okay, so that was the end. What do you guys think about this? There's a lot of patterns. Isn't it crazy? A lot of patterns of the older men, way young women. And this is all just the woman's side of things. So if you were a man and you were listening to this and you plan on leaving a comment, I do want to see your comments, but I also want you to know that I was reading it from only the woman's perspective. So that's probably why there's a lot of patterns going on here. So don't you worry your little booty behind off. Just listen and enjoy. Okay? Thanks for coming by. And if you liked it and you want more, subscribe, baby. Subscribe. Thank you.